tend to be more bold. They tend to, and when I say bold, I mean they tend to take more risks. If they want to do something, they don't necessarily feel like they have to check off all the boxes. They just do it. Whereas women, we tend to focus more on perfection. So, we want to make sure everything is checked off and done correctly. And that holds us back a lot of times. And particularly, I see that a lot in manufacturing. I mean, you just got to like get in there and just do some stuff. Some of it is going to be wrong, some of it is going to be right. But if you wait until you check off all the boxes, until everything is perfect, like you'll just get left behind.
Have you ever wondered what it actually looks like when a company goes all in on its people? Not just with words, but they provide life coaching and financial coaching, and they have a low turnover rate that most companies only dream about. That is exactly the topic that we're going to get into today. Hey everyone, I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your host. Welcome back. But before we get into today's conversation, I'm excited to introduce something brand new. I created this thing for women who are already working really hard, but quite frankly are struggling to show their impact. I can't wait to share more, but you're going to have to wait till the very end. Today, you will hear about the Better Lives program run at JBM Packaging. They are doing good things within their organization and in the world. And they are a prime example of what psychological safety actually looks like when a leadership team is truly committed to it. My guest didn't get to where she is by accident. She encountered challenges growing up that, quite frankly, guided her path. Jacqueline Cooley is a leader of learning and development at JBM Packaging. This is a manufacturing company. She is a speaker and an advocate for inclusive hiring and workforce development. Jacqueline brings experience across social services, government, and manufacturing. And she leads with both operational insight and people-centered leadership. So with that, please join me in my conversation with Jacqueline. Hey, Jacqueline, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Rosie, I am doing well. Glad to be here. I'm glad you invited me to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. So you and I connected on LinkedIn because I know that you participated in the Women in Manufacturing Summit and you did a presentation, which we'll get into your topic in a little bit. But you have built your career pretty much around helping people, making sure that they stop playing small. So let's start there. What do you think has made you so passionate about helping people throughout your career?
So, throughout my career, I have been passionate about helping individuals because there's so many people who come from difficult situations, similar to myself, and really don't have the help that they need to maybe, take the next step or make the next move. And so I've really dedicated a lot of my time to just being that person, being open to help individuals succeed. And I really, really enjoy doing that, and have really found great success at JBM in doing that as well.
Yeah, and JBM is a great platform, and we're going to talk about the Better Lives program. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that you are now in a position of leadership at JBM, and you didn't just get there. You didn't just arrive by accident. You didn't go from, high school, college to this position. There was obviously a journey that you were getting to. Has anything in your career, has there been any one pivotal point that you were like, my gosh, that decision right there was a stepping stone to get to where I was? So tell us about any moments in your career that made you realize that, yep, that was the moment that pivoted everything.
Sure. So I believe there's been a few moments, very pivotal moments in my career. Starting off, when I first got out of college, I worked for a school district in Freeport, Illinois, and actually had supervisor there. I would say her name was Teresa, and she was absolutely amazing. A lot of times, you don't see, at least I don't see very often, even a lot of like Black women in leadership. And so she was a Black woman in leadership and just really had herself together. And I just really enjoyed like our conversations. She would really just give great advice on how to handle certain situations, dealing with a lot of like principles and things like that at the time that sometimes could, just be a struggle because, we were trying to bring young people into school who were struggling and just, had a very difficult time. So just trying to understand how to work with families and deal with those situations. So I really just enjoyed working with her, enjoyed her advice. Just don't stop, don't quit, keep going. No matter, sometimes you're going to run into difficult people, but that's okay, keep going. And then there's been some other times in my career here, within the last couple years, I'd say, where I had a mentor who worked for Cliffs, which is like AK Steel here in Ohio, and she was very, very helpful as well. One of their leaders there in the HR realm, and so just really helped me in defining like what HR looked like and that you didn't necessarily just have to fit into the box. There were so many different areas that you could go into, and um, just really how to communicate effectively with people and when to say something and when to hold back and when to lean in and when not to. So she was very good at what she did, and again enjoyed her conversations. We would meet like on a week, maybe like a monthly basis, I would say bi-weekly, monthly basis, but was very good to me as well.
So obviously the people that are helping you, your mentors, your advocates, you are now have become a mentor and an advocate for so many people, especially with the Better Lives program at JBM. Now, when you first started thinking about this program, about the Better Lives program, and I'm going to circle back to your story because you said you can kind of relate with difficulty. So we'll get there in a little bit. But when you think of your journey in HR now with the Better Lives program at JBM, number one, what prompted you to, or how did the organization start that program and why, if you could tell us about what the program is and why it got started.
So, the Better Lives program at JBM is a program that helps individuals who are coming out of incarceration or in recovery due to addiction. And so that program was started, the Fair Chance program itself was started about 10 years ago, but it morphed into what we now call the Better Lives program, which essentially started about 5 years ago. And so that was with more like wraparound supports. So, really, what we do in that program is once we hire individuals who are coming out of incarceration, they meet with a life coach once a week for the first 6 months for half an hour, which kind of tapers down into bi-weekly and monthly and leads to a graduation. But the point of that meeting is to help them grow both personally and professionally. They've had a lot of different hardships in their lives, a lot of different struggles. And so a lot of them don't have support, and they need that support in order to not only survive, but to thrive. And so what JBM came up with was, let's put that support in place at work, because we know that, if they have support around them, they will not only work here at JBM, and be a great employee, but they'll also be a great, person for their family as well. So yeah, it's been going really well.
Well, first of all, I want to commend an organization like JBM because that is unheard of. Like when you and I got into on our pre-call and I was like, wait, you guys do what? I was impressed because again, JBM, obviously they are number one, trusting you and your team and the people that have, set up these programs. But number two, they're trusting the individuals. And because these individuals have had, like you said, they're coming from incarcerations, typically due to addiction. That is such an amazing thing that you and your company are supporting, because these are people that need that second chance. And so many of those people do not have that second chance. So again, I think it's amazing. Now, tell me, how many people do you think have been impacted through this program, through the Better Lives program at JBM?
So we've had over 300 people that have been
Wow.
impacted by this program, and the program continues to thrive, each year. So, we're impacting more and more lives. Currently, we have about 46% of our population at JBM that are fair chance, team members. So really, we are just trying to help people be the best version of themselves. A lot of that is through their individual work coupled with, life coaching, financial coaching. We help them get transportation, even give cars out, if they need that. Furniture, anything they need,
Wow.
we try and, help them obtain that because we really, really mean what we say in terms of we want them to be the best version of themselves.
I love that. And also, it kind of illustrates once again that we as human beings, especially women, because we tend to be the center of everything that holds, we're the glue that holds our families together. But it is so rare that someone can succeed alone in a vacuum without that support, without those leaders, without the help that the Better
Mm-hmm.
Lives program is providing. Tell me, from the leadership perspective, and I love that you provide the life coaching, that's amazing, but how has that transformed the leadership team at JBM by interacting with these people and do coaching? How has that enhanced the leadership, and what lessons and perspectives have you learned from leading this program?
So it definitely has enhanced our leadership team. It's definitely given, some of them a different perspective on life. Not everybody in our organization has been impacted by, incarceration or addiction. So, it has given them a different appreciation for really who people are. Sometimes we listen to the news and different media outlets, and sometimes we're bombarded by information that's quite negative. This is a bad person, that's a bad person. But when you really start to talk with individuals who have lived these things, and you really get to see, like, actually they're no different than you and I. And to be quite frank, a lot of times, we are one mistake away sometimes from being that person. And a lot of times we don't think about it like that. But, I always ask people, did you speed today? Did you, I mean, it's an illegal thing to do, so hopefully you have a license if you're driving, different things like that. It can have an impact on your life. So by doing this program, we've been able to do different trainings with our leadership team, like around psychological safety, emotional intelligence, engagement, because a lot of times, and I hate to say that, fair chance is different than non-fair chance because we're all people, but we do have a different set of problems per se. And so understanding how to deal with those problems effectively, sometimes a person is shutting down not because they're trying to be mean or rude, but because, quite frankly, they don't have the people skills because they've been locked up for 5 or 10 years. And they have not learned how to deal with frustration or different emotions. And so, teaching some of our leaders, how to be patient with that, how to pull things out of people has been very helpful to not only them, but to our team members.
Hmm. That's wonderful. Now, when obviously this program is more than likely helping retention somewhat, right? Because you hire people, you hope that they stay long term. So how has the retention been for the people that are in the Better Lives program, but also the employees that are not in the Better Lives program? And do they get any support? Like, how does that work? How do you weave that together?
So yes, so in terms of our program, Better Lives program, yes, it is geared for fair chance individuals, but anybody in our company is welcome to use any of the services that we have. So and that's across the board. If they want coaching, if they need a vehicle, whatever, they are welcome to use those services. So it's not just for our fair chance. And then in terms of our turnover rate, we have a 13% turnover rate at JBM. And usually the way that works is we bring on people as a temp employee for the first 90 days, and then we convert them to full time after that.
And has all the leadership been in support of this program from the beginning? How has the senior leadership seen this program impact the organization?
So when Marcus first presented this idea, and Marcus is our CEO, his name is Marcus Shing Shang. When he first presented this idea, he basically laid out this is what we are going to do as a company. We are going to start to hire individuals who are coming out of incarceration. If you have a problem with this, unfortunately, this is the way the company is going. So, you can either be here and go with it, or, you have the option to leave. And so I really believe that set the tone, because all of our leadership team is on board. Everybody is very supportive of everybody. And really, it's just kind of become a way of life. People don't, think twice about, this person or that person. Everybody just works together and do what they need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you also talked about psychological safety. So psychological safety is when you bring your whole person into work and you feel that you can be yourself and speak, your truth and whatever, without anybody judging you or bullying you or anything like that. That psychological safety reinforced continually, because again, if someone has not been incarcerated and now you're bringing people that have been incarcerated, how has that impacted the psychological safety of the other employees in the terms of the leadership reinforcing messages?
So that has been really, it's been done really well, because we haven't had any incidents, like things that would make a person frightened or scared. So, nobody has harmed anybody or, done anything really terrible or anything like that. You just have your normal, work stuff. So in terms of the psychological safety piece of it, our supervisors are really good at allowing people to come in, to be themselves, to not shun them. And really, we don't openly talk about, this person has this crime or that crime. Obviously supervisors know, but that's not something that, we go around and just necessarily have to tell everybody about. Again, fair chance is not a secret though, but it's just, if a person wants to be open and talk about it, they can. If they don't, then they don't have to. In terms of our team members who are training individuals, they understand and have been trained around what it means for a person to be able to kind of open up. They know how to talk to them, and communicate, and sometimes even see red flags, before maybe even some of the supervisors see red flags, or say, hey, maybe this is something you should talk to them about or work on, with them. So everybody really feels, I'd say for the most part, pretty safe to open up and communicate, and really just help, where needed. If one supervisor is feeling uncomfortable, we have other supervisors who can kind of step in and have those conversations. But I would say on average, everybody there is really feeling pretty good and safe and just grateful, to be there.
That's great. And I also love the fact that your organization offers life coaching to everybody. Heck, I always say every corporation should have a coach, definitely a career / life coach, because I am a career strategist, but a lot of times I really talk about feelings and emotions and stuff. So I always say I'm not a therapist, but we always end up talking about, personal things. And it's so interesting, because if I had had the opportunity to have life coaching at work, I'd be like, sign me up. So that's fantastic. Okay, so I want to shift a little bit the conversation to you. You had said that, you believe in this program because you understand that a lot of people have a hard time, and you yourself had a difficult time growing up. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and as you were growing up, what kind of light bulbs of like, oh, I'm not going to do that when I grow up, or I'm going to do that when I grow up. So talk to us about your lessons that you learned as you were growing up.
Sure. Growing up, primarily grew up with my mother in a single parent home. However, my dad was, I'd say, in and out of my life. I mean, up until I was an adult, but he was, addicted to drugs throughout, the time that I was growing up. That relationship with him it was just unstable. You couldn't necessarily predict behaviors, when he was going to be around, when he wasn't going to be around. It was just difficult. I mean, as a young girl growing up and, becoming a young woman, you really need that father figure. You need a man to kind of show you what love looks like, and in a positive way. And so I feel like I missed out on some of that, and had to kind of learn that on my own versus that being demonstrated, within my household. So that was tough. The drug thing, I mean, that was always a very difficult thing, because in my family it was something that was known, but it wasn't really talked about that much. I mean, you could clearly see, the changes in terms of physical appearance, in terms of, the way that my father would, interact when he was using versus, times if I would see him when he wasn't, and just not being able to count on him, a lot of times for pretty much anything, just because that addiction, had him so kind of tied into that. So that was a very, very challenging part of my life, a part of my life that I talk about a little bit, but don't always talk about. It was a little bit difficult. And just, I mean, my mom, she, definitely did the best that she could, was a great mother, my very best friend. But now that I am a mother and, have kind of experienced my children growing up, I do have a better understanding and appreciation for her, and even just understanding, just now in perspective, like looking back, like, wow, this was a really messed up situation. So yeah, I wish things had been different, but despite that, I believe that they made me, the person that I am today. And because of that, I really enjoy giving back, because I feel like we always talk about the people who are addicted to drugs, but we don't talk about the kids or the wives or the husbands who are right there in the mix of the addiction,
Yeah.
and how that affects them.
Absolutely. And so, what were some key learnings? Now that you are where you are in your career, what were some key learnings that you think, the character? We're always a product of, how we grew up, and you would see your parents do or don't do things, and you're like, yes, I am definitely never going to do that thing. But is there any characteristic or leadership trait that you believe you have now that emerged from understanding those difficulties that you had while growing up?
Say one leadership trait now. Well, a couple leadership traits. One is just structure. I am a very structured person, and my kids know, like, when they were growing up, everything was very routine. We got up at a certain time in the morning. We, had breakfast. They went to school. They came home. They did homework. They had after school activity, so it was very, very structured. When we traveled as a family, because I was the only child and I didn't have a lot of that, like with different activities and things like that. So my husband always teases me and says we were a unit, but everywhere we went, if somebody had a cheerleading tournament, the whole five of us were at the cheerleading tournament, or soccer tournament, we were all there. And so it was always really kind of funny, because a lot of times we were one of the only families that would have the entire family there. Now that my kids are young adults, they've come to appreciate, like, oh man, mom, we want to do that with our families. That was so cool. So structure is one of those things. The other thing is just wanted somebody completely opposite of my father. I said, when I get married, wow, I love my dad, God rest his soul. I did not want to marry a man like my father because I just thought he was inconsistent and um, he just didn't take care of his family. And so I wanted the complete opposite. And so that's what I chose is the complete
Mm.
opposite. And so my husband is very much so a provider, one who is very intentional about his family. So even though that's kind of hard to admit sometimes, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And just in terms of leadership, I think structure, I mean, obviously has followed me into leadership, and then just being able to speak my mind. I'm one who I'll kind of let you know how I feel. I've learned over the years to kind of taper that because when I was younger, it just come out and it would land how it would land. But now, I've learned to, that in a little bit and, make it a little bit more tactful, but definitely have learned how to speak my
Well,
mind.
kudos to your mom for being in a difficult situation like that. And sometimes when you're a mother, obviously you're a mother, but sometimes when
Hmm.
you're a mother and you have a difficult situation, I went through a really bad divorce when I was 20 years ago, so my kids were little, and it's like you're kind of like the referee of things, and it's just
Hmm.
such a hard time. Kudos to your mom that she raised such an amazing leader like yourself, and now you are giving back to others. I'm curious. Obviously, we talk a lot about women in the corporate space here and how they're advancing in their corporate careers. But one of the things that you said, you were very vocal and you have to taper down some of your conversation, where I think a lot of women, and specifically high performing women that are already doing a lot of work, that are already killing it at work, and they're not getting that recognition, that reward. And most women are like, I need to speak up. I need to, and you said you had to kind of had to taper that down. So why did you have to taper? And like, what was that experience for you that you found that you had to taper that voice? And has that translated into your leadership role at work?
So when I say taper down, initially I would just, if I saw something or felt like something was wrong, I would, have a private conversation and I would just say it just as is, respectfully, but just as is. And I found that it wasn't always well received. It was, I mean, the intention behind what I was saying was definitely sincere, but the way it was being delivered was not well received. So, fast forward and moving along through, my journey, I've learned that, you can still speak your mind and you can still let people know, how you feel and, where you need to plug in or disconnect. But sometimes there's a certain way to do that.
Mm.
And so I think with myself, I've just kind of found that one, people don't like to be caught on the spot, just in front of, a bunch of
Yeah.
people, like they want to be in private and have a private conversation. And so doing more of that. Also just doing more of, I hate to say fluff, but
Yeah.
sometimes you got to wrap it in a bow a little bit when you give it to people, and you can kind of fill out people in terms of who can, maybe take it, or who you can be a little bit more blunt with and who you can't be. And so that's what I mean. Yeah, it's just difficult sometimes, especially in manufacturing as a woman, because a lot of times in manufacturing, you're dealing with a lot of just traditional people in terms of traditional male roles, traditional women roles.
Yeah.
And so, with that being said, in a traditional household, women, submit to men. And so you see
Hmm.
that a lot of times in manufacturing. And I mean, to some degree, I agree with that, but it's a little bit different in the work setting. At
Yes.
home it's one thing, in the work setting it's another thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, you kind of have to find that. that happy medium there. And so I feel like I've found that, and I have good communication, good conversation with all of the gentlemen that, I have to deal with.
That's great.
Hmm.
It's interesting because I was talking about, you're a product of how you grew up. And my mom, so my dad was like the boss of the home. My mom followed
Hmm.
all things that the boss said. And as we were growing up, my mom always told us, you have to get an education because if something happens in your life, you need to be able to take care of you or you and your kids if the time comes. And my mom, my poor mom, her whole life, she had to follow what my dad did. Now, I'm not saying that she never rebelled. She did rebel, especially as I was like in high school and college. She did start
Hmm.
rebelling more and more, but ultimately, whatever my dad said went. And so I'm one of 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. And the 4 of us girls are like, you are not going to tell me what to do. It's hilarious because at home, hell no, you're not going to tell me what to do. And it's like funny because I'm remarried and one of my friends had said, I always say like to my husband, like, oh, would you mind if I go see like, my
Hmm.
mom or go to lunch? And I was like, would you mind? I'm like, why are you saying, would you mind? I'm like, hell no, I would never say, would you mind? I said, hey, just so you know, I'm going to go see my sister, or just so you know, I'm going to go to lunch.
Hmm.
But I mean, I still inform, but there is no asking permission or would you mind at home. But to your point, when we're at work, we have to be very cognizant of who we're speaking to, what position we're in, all the things. And you said the men and women, the difference, and you're in a
Hmm.
male dominated, you're in a manufacturing role, male dominated.
Hmm.
So I do want to ask you, what has been one thing that you have noticed throughout your years that men may do for their careers that women may or may not do, that you think, oh, that's one thing that, women could be doing better?
Men tend to be more bold. They tend to, and when I say bold, I mean they tend to take more risk. If they want to do something, they don't necessarily feel like they have to check off all the boxes. They just do it. Whereas women, we tend to focus more on perfection. So, we want to make sure everything is checked off and done correctly. And that holds us back a lot of times. And particularly, I see that a lot in manufacturing. I mean, you just gotta like get in there and just do some stuff. Some of
Mhm.
it is gonna be wrong, some of it is gonna be right. But if you wait until you check off all the boxes until everything is perfect, like you'll just get left behind, because it's such a fast-paced environment that there's no time. It's like everybody is kind of learning on the fly, on the go, where what you don't know, you kind of try and improvise, and figure out. So yeah, that's a big thing.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's so interesting, because women tend to just wait and apply for jobs, and men are like, "Hey, it's my next role.
Hmm.
That's my next role,"
Yeah.
and it's just, and it's something that, these conversations, we can have this conversation over and over and over, and we have to keep that repetition for women that are listening to this or
Hmm.
younger women that are coming up behind us, because we have to encourage and support each other too, because a lot of times I hear, women being catty with each other. Madeleine Albright is a former U.S. Secretary of the United States, and she has this saying that says something like, there's a special place in hell for women that don't support other women. And I love that saying, but it's like we have to help each other
Hmm.
grow. We have to help each other find our voice, because a lot of times, even high performing women, and I'm going to be talking more about this, but women know that they're doing a lot of hard work, but they're not able to translate that hard
Hmm.
work into language that the leadership rewards and recognizes. So another podcast guest had said to me, I was doing all these great things at work. I was killing it. And then I went to get my performance review, and my performance review said average. And I was like, what in the heck? I'm doing all this work. And then when she
Hmm.
finally went ahead and had the conversation with her boss, the boss was like, yeah, you're doing all these great things, but 80% of them I don't care about. I was like, wait, like,
Hmm.
so yes, we have to do a lot of great work, but number one, we have to translate it into those key performance indicators, the metrics that the leadership understands and recognizes and that it matters to them. So it's
Yes.
such a it's like a concert that you have to make sure that you're playing the right notes so that it sounds well. And that's one of the things that I'm working on because a lot of women are high performers, but they're
Hmm.
stuck and they don't know why. And I've been discerning that message of like, man, we're not playing the right note, Jacqueline.
I agree.
Well, good. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Jacqueline, is there any one thought that you would like to leave the listeners with that if they're listening to your story or everything that you're doing at work that you want to encourage them to do?
I would leave every woman with be bold and don't let your past define you. I think that's very, very important because I know a lot of times, as women, we can be, just frightened or scared just to move forward because we don't know what people might think or what they might say. But I would just encourage every woman to be bold, and just to take a chance. If you want to do something different, than what you're currently doing, you can definitely do it. Find a good mentor, find somebody that will, help you and take those next steps, or at least, teach you how to take those next steps. But don't just settle. Don't settle and don't get comfortable where you are. Continue to build and continue to strive for the best.
Those are fantastic words to leave this at. Thank you again, Jacqueline, for all the time, for your knowledge, for your expertise. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate you.